Welcome back to Purposeful Thinking. Please remember to like, share, subscribe. As we go into today's video, that is biblical faith, the nature of biblical faith. We'll look at the different dimensions to faith and whence it strives. Let us go into today's video. Peace.
One tonight to our weekly Bible study. Last week we covered Hebrews chapter 10, and we left off at the end of chapter 10, and I decided to continue with chapter 11 and to let us have some discussion around faith, the nature of faith, and what faith looks like. But for us to really get to chapter 11, a lot of times teachers or even readers read chapter 11 as a standalone, not really seeing the connection or realizing the connection that chapter 11 actually has, or how it is tied to chapter 10. And I see preachers a lot of time, both on the TV and I see some inside of the churches of God, pick up this arrow of starting chapter 11 and then see the transitional time marker. Or here it's not even referencing really time, but it is just used as a connector. A connector of thoughts and ideas that was already expressed and is now used to tie what will be said now moving forward to that idea, where he used the word now. And I see preachers take this word, telling their congregants and individuals running around in church saying that they need a now faith. And that means they want things to happen now and mislead individuals and trick individuals, which is the opposite of what the writer is actually saying, because the message that the writer is actually presenting is that faith is not a momentary thing, but faith is lived out as a lifestyle. And I summarize it at New Life and coin the phrase that is often used. I coined this phrase that faith is behavior. And I say that because that's what the writer actually does in chapter 11 to show us that faith is not a momentary event or an action that one holds in a moment and then moves on. But faith is a lifestyle that is lived out and is best expressed when circumstances becomes most visible, when circumstances adversely affects us. And he does this by laying out the argument in chapter 10, because it seems to us, it is evident from what he actually said in chapter 10, that the brethren, the Hebrew brethren that he wrote to, because he was in Italy at the time and he's writing to a Hebrew group of believers, a Jewish group of believers, and that is why the Old Testament looms so prominent in the book of Hebrews, and the sacrificial system and the tabernacle and the Levitical order. And he quotes frequently from the Old Testament in a beautiful way, in a classical Jewish way, where we are used to seeing in other Jewish literature. But what he does is he's saying to the brethren that you are going through persecution and you have obeyed God until this point, but things is coming up against you that is adverse, and all that obedience that you have demonstrated in times past, it seems to me that you want to give up that obedience now because your circumstances seems in your sight to becoming worse. Oh, we know that he's saying that. Verse 32, He said, but recall the former days in which after you were illuminated, you endured a great struggle. So they had some difficulties in times past, but it seems to me that it is becoming worse and they want to give up and throw in the towel. And he's saying, no, that obedience that you have displayed in times past counts for something. That obedience that you have displayed in times past, it is building up to something. It is actually deposits you have made in your bank of obedience and faith before God. Don't allow those deposits to go down the drain. Most of you are from Jamaica. I don't know if you can recall and remember Century Bank in Jamaica that used to exist, that a whole lot of individuals had their money and their life savings in. Some had millions. And the late Edward Seaga borrowed 17 million US dollars from the bank and did not pay back that 17 million US dollars. And Omar Davis and others on the other side found out that he borrowed this amount of money from the bank and went in on the bank and applied pressure. And PJ's answer, not PJ, Edward Seaga's answer was that he never actually remembered that he borrowed the money. 17 million US dollars. And you don't remember that you borrowed, and this is in the 90s. So 17 million US dollars is no joke when it come on to money, because even today, 17 million US dollars is a lot of money. And he said he never remembered. And the bank closed. All the people and everyone that had their life saving and have all kind of money lost it. It was gone. Wiped out. So it is here, the writer of Hebrews is telling the brethren, don't let those deposits of obedience that you have displayed in great struggle with suffering, you walk away from it now because you feel like your circumstances is intensifying, and as a result, you want to give up. Because he said, partly whilst you were made a spectacle, both by reproaches, meaning you were scorned, you were ridiculed in public, the spectacle meaning you were on display. And you went through tribulations, and partly whilst you became companions, you were identified with those who were treated in such a way. He said, you actually, when I was in prison, you actually identified with me and you sorry for me because they had compassion. The word compassion means to be in passion with. To be in, the word passion means suffering. The word passion actually, that is why they talk about the passion of the Christ. The word passion, the Latin term, means to suffer. So, and the word com, the C-O-M at the front is from the Latin preposition, or what we would call, not even preposition. It means, not preposition. A preposition show position. It means with, as I tell you all the time. So compassion means to identify or to suffer with, which the Latin term is the equivalent of the Greek word pathos, where we get the word pathetic, which means we usually use that word pathetic to mean foolish, but the word pathetic in its original context means one that is suffering. So that the writer here is saying, you identify with me as a fellow sufferer. They took away your goods, and you joyfully accepted the plunder, the stealing and the taking away, because you saw it as an identifier with Christ and with all those who have suffered. But now you want to give up. You want to give up. Therefore, and then he's warning them in verse 35, and this is where his argument is going to be linked to chapter 10, because he's going to, in chapter 11, he's going to show that what they are enduring is actually the life of faith that all saints have lived. A life of suffering and a life of endurance, a life of not compromising and not giving up, because in the back of your mind, or the forefront of our mind, is knowing that what we are enduring now is nothing to be compared with the glory, as Paul said, that shall be revealed. Knowing that what we are enduring now must never outweigh the glory that is to come. And he's telling them, therefore, do not cast away your confidence. Don't become discouraged. Don't give up. Sometimes our circumstances push us to the point where we want to give up. Push us to the point where we want to throw in the towel. We have been doing good, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a snowball hits us, and we forget all that we have suffered and endured before and give up, because we believe that, no, this is one but too much. That is where the church group here was. They wanted to give up. And the writer had to endure and said, for you have need of patience, endurance. That's what patience means. The word patience implies suffering. So when we say that we need patience, what we are actually saying is that we want to develop that character where when hardship or suffering comes our way, we are able to endure it. That's what the word suffering means. The word suffering comes from the word upir, which means under in Greek, and the word meno, which means to remain and wait. So opomone, which is from the word mono, is the word patient, which means to abide under adverse circumstances and to remain under it. So when you have patience, it means that you have the ability to cope and to deal with circumstances or situations that are not favorable to you and I. That's what the word patience really means. Upir means under. Under, meno means to wait. Upir meno, to abide under, to wait under. So when we say, and that's what endurance is. Endurance means that you are going against the tide, but you are pushing yourself. We are pushing ourselves to cover what is required of us. And that's what the writer is saying here. So that after you have done the will of God, you might receive the promise. Sometimes we have obeyed God in the past and is waiting on the reward of what we did, and we throw it away because we go and do stuff that we shouldn't have done, and it just wipe out all that we did. Give away. It's like we work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Are we supposed to get pay Friday? But if you get fired, you can't get any pay. Because sometimes you get fired without pay. And you could wait until Friday, you get your pay and then you leave, but you get upset and leave Thursday and you don't get any pay. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, that you should be paid for, you cancel it out because you never wait until Friday. And the terms of your employment says that if you are fired, the very time that you are fired, you will not get any pay. And that's what the writer is saying here to them. You have need of patience, and after you have done the will of God, you might receive the promise. You have already done it, but now you are going through adversity. But what he does here is to tell them that what you are going through requires faith. patience and faith, endurance. For you have need of patience, you have need of endurance. But faith must be coupled with patience, and patience must be coupled with faith. And he told them that the text has told us that the lifestyle of the righteous, because the word just means righteous, same word, same root word, dikaiosune, which means righteousness, same word translate just. The writer is saying, you have need of patience. After you have done the will of God, you might receive the promise. The rules of the game, and I want to drive home this concept to us until we get it, because we need to understand it, and if we understand it, we will be successful. The rules of the game is the just must live by faith. That's how the just lives. But hearing the word faith and believe that it is just a cognitive, a mindset, a brain thinking, and outside of the thinking, that's it. Just say, oh, I believe. The writer is allowing them to know that no, faith is deeper than that. Faith is only demonstrated and realized through our behavior and how we live. It is our lifestyle that shows that we have faith. And the scripture already prophesied that the just shall live by faith. But he goes on to clarify for them what that word really means. He isolates the word faith because to be righteous is clearly known and understood, is to do right doing and to behave a certain way. But some of us, as well as they, we just relegate faith to a mental process. But the writer here is showing that faith is actually not just a mental process, but faith is the introduction to the mental process of ideas and thoughts that should drive how we act. The just shall live by faith. So now he goes on to say, you understand what it means to be just, but clearly you don't understand what it means to have faith. That is why he started off chapter 11 by saying, now faith is. Because he's going to now define for them what faith is, and on our contemporary terms, what faith looks like in action. As the media often say when protests begin, you would say, we need justice, and the media would ask the young people that are out there protesting, what does justice looks like for you? And they would say, all right, we need the banks to come into the black community, give capital to black businesses, so on and so forth. That's what justice would look actually like for us. That's what the writer is doing here for them with the word faith. He's now things that is very prevalent and become very, very, very clear to us. When you go back to Jamaica a lot of time, not so much these days, because a lot of people in Jamaica now have become very successful, and the younger people go to their college and get their little jobs and have their cars and everything, so and they can go out and do what they want to do. So they don't know this sort of thing or have this kind of faith. But when you go to Jamaica, for example, back then, a few years ago, before we became so modernized in the church and become so affluent and become so wealthy, we used to hear testimonies. And when you heard those testimonies, you want to just get up and run because you had no question concerning the power of God. And that was the case because individuals had no means to change their circumstances. All they had was their faith. And their faith shined through because faith thrives when there is adversity, when there is suffering. And that is actually what the writer is putting forth here. That your circumstances that you are going through now, and I'm saying this to us here, as the writer said it to them there, our circumstances that we are going through now can become a catalyst for us to see the power of God, can become an opportunity for us to trust God. It is not something for us to give up. A lot of times individuals want to give up because they don't believe that their life is going the way that they intended it or the way they visualize it. But the just must live by faith. So the writer says now faith is the substance. He uses here a philosophical term. Let me just get behind what he's saying. The word substance, in normal scientific terminology, the word substance really means that which a thing is made of. So, for example, you and I are substances. We are made of substances, the little particles or whatever it is that make up our flesh and our bones. That is substance. A substance is the material that makes up a thing, that makes a thing tangible and that distinguishes it from other things. That's substance. So the writer of Hebrews is saying faith becomes the reality. Let me translate what he's saying. Faith allows us to experience the reality of the things that we are hoping for. I remember Paul tell us in Romans what hope is. Paul says, and I hope you are getting this, because what I'm saying, I hope it's making sense to you, because I'm kind of really getting deep below what the writer is saying and make it becomes more visible for us. Paul said that which is seen is not hope. For if it is...
Sorry, can you repeat it before you start this sentence? Can you repeat what you said a while ago about faith allow us to experience what?
I'm going to run it back by you. I'm setting this up so I can go back and explain that.
Okay.
Paul tells us that hope that is seen is not hope. Hope is something that is not seen. It is something that is projected in the future. But faith now becomes that tool that we have that make that thing that is not seen become real to us. Does it make sense? So faith is the substance of things that are hoped for. I remember substance is the real concrete evidence of the thing that exists. Does this make sense? So faith is what take what God promised us in the future and allow it to become reality in our life in the here and now. And because it becomes real, it affects how we behave even though we don't experience that thing in the future yet. Does this make sense? So what the writer is saying, that faith becomes the tangible evidence for us of the thing that is not yet seen. So faith allows us to believe that tomorrow will come even though we have not experienced tomorrow yet. And as a result, We press out our clothes, Sister Ross. We iron out our clothes. We pack our lunch bag. We boil our tea and we pack our lunch bag and we have our clothes ready for tomorrow, even though tomorrow is not here yet. Faith is what allows us to do all of those things. Faith allows tomorrow to become a reality to us in the present and influence our behavior in the present. Does this make sense?
Yes.
What you were asking me to repeat, does it come across clear now?
Yes, it does.
That's it. So that's what faith really is. Faith is what allows us to take something that is not yet experienced and behave in such a way and do things, preparing ourselves for that thing to come to pass. So this is why I say to us, and the phrase become coined from what I said, and I am glad that people pick up on it. This is why I said faith is behavior. Because it is faith that allows us to prepare our uniform and our food and our lunch and everything for tomorrow, even though tomorrow is not yet here. So that's how it becomes the substance of things hoped for and the evidence to us of things that is not seen. So when we actually truly believe God and truly trust God, our life must be lived out in a certain way. If you want to accomplish certain things, you have to, you can't, if you imagine yourself driving, for example, a Benz. You say, you know what? A Benz is my dream car, you know. And I know that it will cost me $45,000 to buy an E-Class Benz because I like the E-Class. And it is a dream car, which means it is something that is not yet arrived at. And you start to work and you start to put on the money. And that behavior of putting down is telling you that that Benz will become yours. That Benz will one day actualize before your eyes. But until that happens, your behavior is to save. And it is that idea and the reality of the possibility of the Benz that is actually driving you to put down that money. If we take this principle and understand it, it will revolutionize how we live. Because we will understand that if we want our lives to change in whatever direction that is good, we have to start behave. We have to start behave. And that is why I said to us week before last week that one of the first principles that we have to end up accomplish in life, in any area of our life, if we're going to be successful, is that we have to transform our mind. Because we have to start program our mind to think and behave in accordance with the reality that we are trying to pursue. So faith actually becomes the evidence to us of the thing that we have not seen yet and that we are trying to accomplish. That's what faith actually does for us. So faith is not so much so the cognitive process. Faith is actually the acceptance of that which is hoped for and then behave in such a way in compliance with that which we are longing for. For by faith, by believing that the things that they are looking forward to would come to pass, the elders obtain a good testimony. By faith, we understand that the worlds were framed from the word of God, so that the things which are seen were not made from things which are visible. This is a profound statement that the writer makes here. The writer is saying to us that it is faith that caused us in the first place to believe that God actually created the world from nothing. So in Genesis 1, when God says, let there be and let there be, nothing previously was there. Those things that God called into existence came out of nowhere. Nothing prior to it of its kind existed. God by just his powerful word. So all of these trees and grass and all of these things that we're experiencing, prior to God saying it, nothing of that sort existed in the material world. And God speak them into existence. And it is by faith we come to believe that the things that are seen, we call this creation ex nihilo. Ex mean from, nil mean nothing or zero. Those of you who are familiar with sports terminology in the Caribbean, because they don't say it here that way. When a football game or so is played and no goal is scored, the commentator would say, or the sportscaster would say, the game ended 0-0, which is the Latin word. That word nil is actually Latin. It's not an English word. So nil means zero or nothing. Ex means from. So when in theological technical terms we talk about creation ex nihilo, mean God creates the world from nothing. There are other traditions that believe that their gods created the world from things that already existed. But within the Christian and the Jewish tradition, that is what distinguishes us from others when we give our narrative about creation, is that what we believe is that the things that do exist came from nothing that previously existed. And it is faith that allows us to accept that. That God by his powerful word speak all things. And this is what show us how magnificent and powerful God is. Because God created the world from nothing that previously existed, and he created billions and billions of species just by saying it. And when you look at the intricate details that exist in the species that exist, you realize that, my God just said this, and in one day, all of these species have all of these features and this uniqueness and all of these things that does all of these kind of unique things, and God just say those things into existence. This is how great and powerful God is. The sun that radiates so much heat that we can't even look into it, or else we are blind. And the sun is 93 million miles away from the earth. Okay? And God called that into existence. Flames of fire just spinning and giving energy to all kind of things. You and I benefit from the sun with our vitamins. And we are walking around and don't even realize that the sun is actually giving our body vitamin. And if we stay inside our house for too long, we become deficient of the vitamin. And doctor have to give us it artificially or tell us to go outside and make sure we are getting sun, because God created the world so intricate. When we read Genesis, we just glance over all of the intricacy of what exists. And this is why, if you are a Christian, except for the philosophical, especially the atheistic philosophical, scientific agenda that is pushed sometime in the name of science that is not actually science, If you are a Christian and you understand the magnificence, you have to appreciate science, because Genesis just tell us that God created all these things and said to us that be fruitful and multiply. Genesis don't explain to us in detail all of the intricacy that God prepared in the world. It is science that allows us to realize, because nothing in Genesis told us that human existence and the body was actually benefiting from the existence of the sun, and we are getting vitamin from it, and that the environment, we have a relationship of carbon and oxygen being exchanged, animals and plants benefiting. So when we look at what God did in Genesis, we realize that God created an eco-interdependent system. Plants need us, we need plants. And we are reciprocating with each other. And it is science that actually spell out all of that kind of details for us. You understand? So you can't be a Christian and be anti-science altogether. It doesn't really work, because there are things that science help us, and it allows us to even appreciate God more when we understand more about how the world works in its natural order. But you have atheistic philosophical ideas that are used to push science and to push a narrative. That is what we're against, not science in and of itself. Science in and of itself has taught us a lot. And truth, I remember sitting in physics class, and the brilliance of what I was learning about the world and the universe and the light and how light function, it allowed me to see how great God is. It allowed me to see how great and magnificent and powerful God is. And allow Romans 1 to open to me when the writer says, things that are made, God's eternal power and Godhead is clearly seen and understood by the things that are created. So it is through the things that are created, our faith is strengthened and we get to see the power of God. But those of us who are inside the church, we get a chance to really see the power of God also from a spiritual perspective and a spiritual experience. We do 2 more verses and then we wrap up. So, as I said, as Christians,
Minister
yes,
Barry, I have wanted to ask a question a long time. Okay, so for an example, you answer part of the question, but if we pray for something, how does the behavior of faith comes into that? For instance, if we pray for healing for somebody, for instance, you pray for me, then how the behavior of faith comes in?
When you say pray for feeling for somebody, what do you mean?
Like, if I am sick and you are praying for me, how does the faith comes in that?
Oh, so
we have the faith, but how we see the behavior of the faith.
The behavior is me praying for you. Because I can actually say, oh, Sister McDonald, you are actually gonna be better. But I never actually ask. I remember what Jesus tell us. You have not because you ask not. And sometimes, so the act of praying at times become that behavior. And then sometimes, we pray and we trust that God is gonna heal, but we also take action by for example, you might be sick, and I know from the knowledge that God has given me that probably if I make you some chicken soup, it will help your immune system, because God created the immune system to work that way, that when certain natural ingredients from the world that He made go into our body, it helps to strengthen it. So part of what sometimes becomes my behavior is the action that I take probably in even sometime going and make that soup for you, give it to you, and trust God that you are gonna be healed. So the behavior sometimes takes on. James tell us that if a brother actually say that he's hungry and you say go ahead, God will bless you. James tell you that that is not just faith. That sometimes is madness. James says, if you have the power in you to give the brother food, then that sometimes becomes actually a demonstration of faith. For I say, if you tell a brother that God will help you, and then he gone, he said, no, show me your faith by the works that you perform. So sometimes the action that we take, that sometimes people read as not trusting God, is actually trusting God. Because, for example, you remember when Naaman went to Elisha. Elisha could have just prayed for Naaman and he's healed. But he said, no, go down by the river Jordan and dip in the river 7 times. That was action. And that action becomes a demonstration of the belief that what was said will come to pass. And he actually went there and dipped in the water. And after he did that, that's when God responded to what was being asked of cleansing him. You and I know that the river don't have any healing power in it naturally for leprosy. You and I know that nobody in our time can have leprosy and jump down in a river and all of a sudden their leprosy gone just dip in 7 times. Because when you have leprosy, it's actually sore and all kind of things break out on your body. So we understand that it was the act of listening. God responded and touched him supernaturally. So that's how sometimes our behavior is seen. Sometimes it's just the act of praying. Because Jesus said, you have not because you ask not. And sometimes this is why it's tricky. Because sometimes you might have that concept in your mind and said, oh, but if I don't do nothing, then it might mean that I lack faith. And you actually run ahead of God. So that is why the word warns us. And I have to come back and warn us. Lean not to your own understanding, but in all thy ways acknowledge him. Because sometimes we might have good intention and good desire, but it's not in line with what God wants in that moment. So we have to couple that thin line between acting on our own intuition and acting in a manner that is driven by faith, led by the Spirit, and that will be rewarded by the Spirit. Because sometimes we run ahead and saying, you know what, I remember when I just came here, I wanted to get into the construction union so bad, because when I just came here, I had friends that were doing construction work and the amount of money that they were making. And I'm saying, wow, I need to get in. But every time I tried to get in, the door slammed in my face. Every time. By the time I would get to a connection to a person that was a supervisor in the union that retired, a white guy, and that my previous boss tried to put me onto. And I couldn't get in. Brother David retired from the union, tried to get me in, couldn't get in. Another brother come tried to get me in the steel union, couldn't get in. Told us when the apprenticeship was gonna call. And when it come around, couldn't get in. Another brother came to my boss and tell him that when he just came to America, he will not forget what he did for him. He gave him $50 when nobody else gave him any money, and he never forget. And if he want him to get him in the union, and he take him, carry him by the union and get him in. And I was there and couldn't get in. And my boss got in and never turned up a day of work. The union calling him to work and he never went. And I who wanted to get in. But every time I am trying, the door slam in my face. And I'm saying, but what is this? I am trying and all of these connections are around me. and I can't get in. And I remember one Sabbath we were coming to church at this time. Myself and Pastor Mark used to travel together. And Pastor Mark said, Brother Richie, time I think Pastor Mark was Brother Mark. He wasn't even pastor yet. Pastor Mark said, Brother Richie, don't worry, man. God has set you up for something else, man. God don't want you to go through that door. And when I look back over my life, I realized that all those doors was closed on me, not because they were closed. I would have put myself in a situation that God never wanted me to be in. And even though I am taking action, trying to get in, God kept on slamming the door in my face. And sometimes that's how it goes. We take action. So that is why it is a thin line, Sister McDonald, between sometimes knowing when God say move and it become a walk of faith from when it become a presumptuous self-will walk. And that is the tricky part about this walk. Sometimes you not moving become a symbol of doubt, and sometimes it become a symbol of presumption. And that is why we have to be so in tune with the Lord that we know his voice. And that voice will keep us from stepping out of line. Praise God. I hope that I was able to answer the question that you asked. Is there anyone else with any question? All right.
So is it that you would say doubt and fear is because all right, you would say to do something then, and it's not like you don't have faith, but you are fearful, or would you call it a fear, or would you call it
doubt and fear is not the same thing, but they are related, because fear can actually be what is pushing the doubt. You understand? Fear is an emotion. Okay. Fear is an emotion. Doubt is actually a presumption and an idea that we have in our mind, a restrictive action. So fear is believing that we are going to, some harm is gonna reach us, and then that concept of believing that harm is gonna reach us trigger in us the doubt that causes us not to act. Yeah. So doubt become, sometimes doubt become an indecisive decision, and then the fear is what allows us to be indecisive. So like, for example, let me try and explain them a little bit clearer in concrete terms. You're going to buy a car and you want to buy the car, but you say, but suppose I lose my job. And you have the decision to make between buying the car and don't buy the car. You have the action to take, right? You have the action to take to buy the car and don't buy the car. And then in the back of your mind, you start to say, suppose I lose my job. If I lose my job, I got action and lose the car. I don't want to lose the car, so therefore, I'm not going to buy the car. So it's a fear that causes you to conclude that you are not going to buy the car. The choice of not buying the car is not the fear. It's the fear lead you to choose not buying the car. And the fear there is not based on any reality that you know. It is just based upon you surmising that reality might become this way. So therefore, let me don't take the action. So fear sometimes is not always bad. Fear is not always bad enough. Because fear sometimes is a protective mechanism that we have. Fear functions sometimes as a protective mechanism. Because it is fear that causes us not to, when we hear gunshot firing, not to walk out in it. Because fear tells us that we are going to be armed, so restrain yourself. So fear is an emotion that actually drives us. And if we are able to separate and control that emotion, we make decisions much better.
Okay. Thank you very much.
No problem. You're welcome. I hope I hope that some of what I am teaching is helpful because it's deep human psychology and our minds work and how we make decisions. And I'm trying to make the scriptures concrete to us in ways that make sense and it become real to us because we have a tendency at times. And when I say tendency, when we read the scriptures, to distance those who are we are reading about from reality. But what the text is telling us, Paul tells us, it is for our admonition, for our learning. So there are things there that we can walk away with. And those are the things that I'm trying to separate from the text for us to walk away with. And that is why I'm kind of trying to go as far as I'm going with how the human mind and mentality and all of that works. So may God bless us tonight. I will stop here.